So hi everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Soapbox here at Ice Blue Sky. We were just talking actually, and we just realised we've not been in the studio, have we, that much?
Altogether?
No, not at all. We've been busy doing podcasts with lots of other clients.
I've done more this year, collectively.
Yeah, I think so. So it's good for us to sort of collectively be back in the studio. And we thought it would be a really good idea, I guess, to do a little bit of reflection in relation to what the year has been like, and it's been up and down, but finishing on a real high, which is really good. But also as well, what we wanted to do was just to focus on something that we've titled called Future Truths, and we say that, and it's a little bit of a perspective in relation to how we're seeing the industry. Where do we see things going? We did actually try to talk about, let's not talk about AI, because everyone's talking about AI. Everybody's talking about AI right now.
It's a given, really, isn't it?
Of course it is, yeah.
But I think there's still a lot of mystery around it. And the practical application of AI, I think people are still very hungry for, to understand, what can they do with it? How can they make an impact? That it's not just ChatGPT, right? That is not what we're talking about when we talk about AI. So maybe we should sneak a little bit in.
Yeah. I mean, I think
sure it will.
Let's talk about the elephant in the room. I think from a productivity perspective, I think we're all seeing, from a marketing and agency side, we're all seeing, aren't we, that uplift in productivity in relation to what we're able to do with it. But I think so. But everybody's looking at that, and everybody's talking about that, and they're right to do that. And Francesca, I think what you talk about, we're all learning as an industry. Definitely. We're all learning as people. I mean, we did a review with our internal team, didn't we, the other day? And we weren't even really talking much about AI 12 months ago.
No.
A little bit, but it's just it's accelerated massively.
It was more on the creative side a year ago, with Mid-Journey and applications like that, rather than sort of a lot of the tools that we're using now.
Yeah, so like most things, I've gone to ChatGPT or I've gone to AI and Google, and we've started to look at what are the major drivers. So what are the major drivers next year in relation to account-based marketing, lead generation, sales enablement, partner enablement, all the things that we get involved with as an agency. And I just thought we'd sort of start to kick off with that. There was an interesting statement actually from Forrester, and it said in 2025, the marketeers who excel will be those who turn data proliferation into accountable intelligence, building a true 360-degree account view. Now, I think none of us can really disagree with that, can we?
Definitely.
I guess it's, what are we doing with that view?
So, and actually my mind goes straight to AI.
Yeah, of course it does.
Because you've got like the predictive AI that we use. Yeah. Marketeers have a huge amount of data and have done for a long time. The quality of that data varies massively, but they've never really had an opportunity to use it properly, I think. But now machine learning, predictive AI has got very powerful thanks to the increase in chip capacity. So you can use AI to analyze, segment, predict data patterns very quickly. And as we've said at various times over the years, ideal customer profile, cross-sell, upsell, churn, all of those can now be predicted from huge amounts of customer data quite quickly. And I think that is unlocking a lot of value for marketeers.
Definitely. I was literally talking about it this morning with a client and talking about how when they have a problem with marketing attribution in terms of their pipeline, and when they're actually having those closed deals, uncovering and surfacing where some of those smaller deals actually might be the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
And that's another area where you've got a huge amount of data, but not that ability to analyse at scale.
Definitely.
Well, certainly, I mean, in that instance, we're talking about cross-sell and upsell, aren't we? So, and I know the conversations we've had, are having, and we will be having next year is going to be very much around that subject. Because if we're locked into accounts, we all know how much effort it takes to get net new accounts. And I always say, how much rocket fuel do we have to burn to get into orbit? But actually with existing businesses, as you said, it's about ferreting around, it's trying to find those pockets of additional opportunity. And again, I think that's a fantastic opportunity for marketing to get involved with that, to almost, put a term on it, rinse the opportunities almost as much as we can.
Definitely, and it's an opportunity for marketing to show their impact to the business as well. And I think, Charlotte, it's a lot you've talked about this year is around that commercial marketeer and a marketeer operating at that C level. And by using that intelligence and being able to actually impact the strategy, drive ROI and growth is huge.
Definitely.
I was having a good debate with someone the other day, and it's a little bit of a sort of I got my own little soapbox sometimes, and we're all aware of the power of intent. And I think it's a massive benefit to understand those people that are in that buying journey well before you're aware as a supplier. But my argument is, because intent is so broadly used now across so many organisations, when you get to the table of opportunity, are you just sitting at that table of opportunity with all your competition anyway? Because everybody's buying intent, everybody's using intent, and you get, it's like the old Pals Club, isn't it? You get around the table and, oh, well, nice to see you again. Oh, what's this opportunity?
Well, it turns any area into a red ocean. It makes it incredibly competitive, I agree. And a lot of the conversations we've had this year have been talking to clients about using their top of funnel to create their own intent signals. And this is also, it's a good terminology to use with sales, because rather than using the word awareness, which I think doesn't always communicate a value, whereas if you use the word intent both with the business and with sales, and you talk about your top of funnel in that way, you create your own market of intent. And because you can see, you have to have a really good content program obviously to enable that, but I think it's much more, if I agree, I think intent has its place, definitely, but it's one aspect, I think, of several different strategies to really understand who's in the market.
And I definitely think as well, Graham, you were saying about how you use that data to affect effectively. And so it's once you've got that intent, it's then using that insight, that intelligence in terms of how you then engage further, isn't it? In terms of going back to the conversation around personalisation, right? And I think that's really crucial in terms of when you're using data, is to drive that as well.
Exactly, and this is one of my soapbox areas, personalisation, because it's, what do we mean by personalisation? And I think, lots of people think about personalisation as, name, company name, job title, if you're lucky. But for me, personalisation should be about insight.
Exactly.
And applying that insight to your content that is tailored to the people that you're talking
100%.
to. And that, I think, is, to circle back to the original quote from Forrester, that is a huge amount of value that all this data that marketeers have can offer.
Which is a great lead-in.
Well, look at that. It's like we rehearsed it.
It's like you knew what I was going to say next, isn't it? Which is it's a great lead-in to the next future truth, I guess. And it's looking at, it's marketing's job to bring people together. And specifically what we want to talk about there is exactly what you were just talking about. It's those buying groups within the various organisations that you need to engage with, because we now know how many decision makers are involved in actual key buying decisions. But they all sit within buying groups. And I guess for us, the challenge is to make sure that that content is relevant across those different departments, those different buying groups, to drive that consensus of understanding. But more importantly, it's about to decipher or to see who is active in those buying groups. And then it's about focusing on them in the decision-making unit, on how we talk to them.
Yeah, because this is a good middle of the funnel activity, in terms of if you think about the top of funnel with that intent focus and flavour to it, then if you think about the middle of the funnel, it's going down a level deeper, as you said, into the actual decision-making unit, which can be made up of multiple buying groups, and it's then understanding intent. And again, I do think using that word is a really good way to engage the business, to show the value of what marketing is doing. So we say, right, we've got 3 enterprises scoring 82% on the intent scale, top of funnel. Middle of funnel, it's at 60%, which might mean, we've engaged whatever the measurements are, that we've engaged with X% of that decision-making unit across these X number of buying groups. And particularly in ABM, that is a really good discipline to get into, because then when you as we've talked about before, when you have the sales pods with the sales team, you've got something quite tangible to talk to them about. You're not just saying, oh, well, we've had X amount of clicks on this email and X amount of clicks on this social ad. It's like, here's real insight into what those accounts are doing.
And I agree. And I think if you think about the way that salespeople sell, it's not, or shouldn't be anyway, single contact into an organisation. It's much more about understanding the account. It's about opportunities, not leads. So as we start to build out that insight and intent around the different decision-maker units within that account, sales are naturally going to become more engaged because they're seeing it as an opportunity in all of those different touch points or people points, I should say. Actually.
And it gives them the scale that they need, as if there were several, 4 or 5 salespeople focused on one account. It enables them to reach out and have connection with all those different people, but then focus their time where it's best applied. And it's a bit of a nirvana approach, because not everybody. It's not that people aren't brave enough to try it. I think they're often not measured on it. So getting the organisation to see the value is tough.
I think there's a comfort in the traditional measurements, aren't there, and the different traditional metrics. So again, it probably goes back to some of the things you've been talking about, Charlotte, around the commercial marketeer.
Yeah, absolutely. And to support this, again, it's my one and only, my second quote from Forrester. And he says, shifting marketing priorities on the buyer, both within marketing and partnerships with other business functions, must be a major focal point for 2025. So everything we've spoken about there, that's what they're saying. And I think the challenge for marketeers and for agencies is, how do you collectively bring those people together across those different buying functions to get that consensus? And we were talking just now when we were about that content and making sure it really resonates. But how do we nurture that as marketeers? How do we get them to share that and interact with each other within their buying groups, and with potentially creating their own decision-making unit? And I think that's a challenge, because so many of these buying groups we've seen, isn't it, they work in their individual silos. And so you want to have a conversation with this person over here and this person over
Well, they
there.
may not even know who those other people are.
Absolutely. And it's interesting from a marketing perspective that sometimes the marketeers know who they are, but do the people in the organisation actually know who they are as well?
Well, and if you think about traditional sales, as a salesperson, we've all done it. You make yourself known to different people, and then you introduce them if they don't know each other. And I think marketing has a big responsibility to do that, for sure. Excellent.
Right, let's look at the future truth number 3, shall we? What is this going to be? No surprise, because it's one of the biggest challenges, isn't it? I'm going to call it marketing and sales, because I say marketing and sales. Everyone says sales and marketing. I say marketing and sales, because marketing comes first before sales. But it's about how and will they, and we believe they will in 2025, how they're going to start working even more closely together. And are we seeing this as a trend? Certainly I can say we are, from the accounts that we're engaged with and the projects we're in. But are we still seeing pushback? Are we still seeing that sort of reluctance? Tell me. Tell me that I'm wrong.
I, for one, remain highly sceptical. Certainly for consistency, because, I've been doing this since the 90s, and this has been a topic of conversation both here and across my career. I just think it's not standard. It's so dependent on the individuals within the business, both in terms of personality, but also in terms of leadership, about how much they work together. I think we all kind of know it's a good idea. Don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think business generally is getting more collaborative, but it's still not consistent, I don't think, across. Again, I think because of compensation and measurement. Sales are measured and live and die by their sales revenue. And it can be difficult for them to justify the time that's needed to get involved, particularly in ABM, in accounts a bit earlier, where it's not so close to opportunity close. It could be a year out, and I just think it's human nature to focus on what's going to give you your number.
Well, we experienced this year, didn't we? We had feedback from one account that shall remain nameless, but one account said, sales don't take marketing leads as seriously as they do their own sales leads.
Until?
Yes. And I think you obviously hit on a big point there in relation to remuneration and drive and incentive. And if salespeople are going to get remunerated better for their own leads, but yet marketing, the quality of the leads that marketing send in is measurably 3, 4, 5 times better than maybe the opportunities that the salespeople are driving. So it's a cultural
I don't
thing.
know. I don't think that is the case. I think that the marketing leads have been poor because there's been such a pressure on MQLs and MQL volume, and that's what marketeers are measured on. So they spend a lot of their time just getting things into MQL by hook or by crook. Sales have to qualify and close, and if they can't do that quickly with those leads that come over from marketing, that's when they start to ignore the leads from marketing. And I think that's what had happened in the company you're talking about. And until we went through that ABM process with them, and then they started getting 50% throughput to decision maker as opposed to 5%, suddenly they woke up and started paying attention to the marketing leads.
Definitely. I'd agree. And I think culture, you touched on it a little bit there, Charlotte, of the organisation. I think probably the marketing maturity of an organisation and to sense the sales side of things has a lot to play on it, because sometimes there is almost can be this marketing versus sales. I think we are seeing a trend of that stopping, but people are wanting to attribute opportunity or value of closed deals to marketing or to sales. Whereas when we know when we bring those two things together, it is much more powerful because of how buyers want to engage with organisations.
It can't be either or, can it?
It's got to be both. And I think it's education. I think, like you guys just spoke about then, when you have these proof points and you can show these almost like pilot projects and what they've delivered to the business, we start to align those KPIs, we start to align those I guess attitudes, for the want of a better word. And I think that's crucial. But I think it's almost, in some companies, it's taking this a pilot approach. Let's try it here, let's show what it looks like, let's build upon it and then build upon those successes. Whereas other organisations, I agree with you, Graham, I think there has been a lot of progress on that in terms of listening from a marketing point of view, from sales, in terms of, well, what's happening in the market? What are our clients that we've closed with and are delivering with? What are they saying? What feedback can we take from that, and what can we do more of, and how can we support that from a marketing function? I think it's a closed loop, it's a two-way communication to build together.
And I think everybody enjoys it more as well. I mean, we most certainly do, don't we? We're engaged with one client at the moment where we have got sales at the table. We've got marketing at the table as well. So we're talking to sales. We're interviewing them about the target accounts they want to go after. They're giving us massive, great insights, great direction.
Yeah, they always do.
Which fuels what we're doing, which supports the marketing function and what the achievement is. And it just feels like you're happier about it, as opposed to you feel that you might come up against challenges.
Well, and it makes the personalisation much more effective.
It goes back to the insights, right?
Yeah.
And people engaging with the customers have such insight, and we can just draw on that.
For sure.
So, future truth number 4, and I don't think this is going to be much of a shocker for everybody, but people are back in the room. So we're seeing for 2025 a massive uplift for in-person events. Now, we're not talking about just exhibitions and things like that, although I know that they've gathered a lot more traction and acceleration for people attending there. But actually, there is a massive appetite to get in the room, to interact with your peers in a very intimate way, to share war stories, to share focal points, to learn. And the more research I've done on it in preparation for this podcast, a lot more people are talking about it. And I just wanted to sort of just get your thoughts about that as well.
Yeah, I think events you have to look at it really carefully in terms of what's the objective for those events. I think they have to be purposeful. I think they have to be really valuable in terms of the information, what you're trying to talk about. And in what are you trying to achieve, i.e. is this like your lead generation? Are we doing webinars, or, well, it's not webinars here, but events for the event's sake? Or actually, is it very focused kind of content? We want to be engaging at that C-level. We want to be driving momentum in a specific area, whether it's a new solution that we've launched to market, or is it net new areas or particular sectors that we want to engage. And that, for me, is where I see the real value of events, not events for lead generation, for almost like the sake of it. Yeah, that's where I think they're not getting traction, and where
Yeah.
I would really caution against them.
100%, because it's like everything in marketing should be. It should be about the buyer.
Yes.
So what's going on with the buyer? Where do buyers need help? Where do they need guidance? And that's a really good place to start. And you blend that in with, you know, the solution or offering that you have. And we've seen it work well this year, haven't we, with quite a few roundtables where we spend quite a bit of time at the beginning. You know, that they'll have a value proposition as an organisation and probably for that solution. But you have to refine it down when you're running an event, because you've got this small amount of time to engage a very specific audience. So find a way to talk about that solution in their language, about a specific problem that industry is having and struggling to solve. And then you will get so much more from any event that you run. You know, rather than going out with a kind of broadcast, broad brush approach. Definitely.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, Charlotte. It's not about you as an event, as a vendor, talking about what you do, your products, your solutions. No one wants to be sold at, right? They want to be helped to solve their challenges, be inspired, but from a practical sense, like, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying, but how does that apply to my organisation? How can I move this forward?
In the next 30, 60, 90 days.
Exactly.
Seeing a lot of that, I think, this year.
Yes, definitely.
It plugs into my favourite word, authenticity.
100%.
I think having people in the room around that, looking at a common problem, trying to do that, it comes across as being authentic, genuine, and people are trying to understand it and trying to educate themselves on it. And you might say that is beyond these types of broadcasts or webinars and things like that, where people might be switching away from that. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know. I think podcasts have really taken off this year. I mean,
yes.
But it serves a different purpose,
It does,
doesn't it?
yeah.
And that's what we're
Exactly.
talking about. Like the events, they're successful when they're serving a particular purpose, a particular objective. Whereas podcasts here, like the reason we do it is to share our knowledge with others, and hopefully it's an interesting conversation for people to partake in, right?
yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So we are on the final future truth, number 5. And Francesca, I know this is something you're quite passionate about, but we were talking about this the other day and about the relationship. And we're now going to talk about vendors. We're going to talk about manufacturers, vendors, IT manufacturers, suppliers, and how they're working with their partners, and how that relationship for 2025 you see, particularly how that's changing, or how you're seeing that landscape change in 2025.
Yeah, definitely. And I think whether it's a vendor from a manufacturer, sort of hardware, or a software sort of software perspective, working with that channel, like indirect, or for them it's a channel, right? Indirect business is really changing, and I think it's getting a lot more purpose for it. We're seeing a reduction in MDF funding, a reduction in the number of partners that get MDF funding, right? So going from, say, 100 partners in EMEA down to maybe 60 in EMEA get those funding, because it's much more purposeful then, because it's about building that partnership, but also it's about how are they executing together in market to actually move the needle, rather than just doing X, Y, and Z. And I've had like quite a few conversations about this over the last, quite a while, but especially over the last quarter, really, in terms of moving away from doing and spending money for the sake of it on the same old things. Like, we're all still doing telemarketing, or we're still just doing webinars, but actually we're not seeing the ROI of that. So that MDF is almost going up into smoke, right?
Yeah.
Same
It's
with, like,
ticking boxes.
I would also argue, like, marketing heads, funded heads, are maybe not the most effective use either, right? Maybe slightly controversial then. So I think the trend is definitely thinking, how do you move the needle? Budgets aren't getting any bigger, but let's be more purposeful. And how is that linking into the strategy and the objective that partner and vendor have together? And how can we be more creative? Because that is key in a very competitive market, right?
We had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with a vendor, and I was actually really excited because they actually said the words to us: look, we know we have quarter by quarter funding cycles, but actually what we want from you is a 12-month strategy that then utilises those quarterly funding cycles to drive the results. And that was amazing. That was the first time I've heard that for a long time in that scenario, because
Definitely.
you know, people are having to accept the reality that everything takes longer.
Yeah.
Everything takes longer. You don't just get that kind of magic. But, I remember, and I know I've said this before on a previous podcast, but I remember, when I started in the 90s, you would have one day of telemarketing would equal one lead, often bank qualified. I mean, that is never going to happen again. And, now we're seeing between 8 and 12 days in order to get one opportunity or, one lead. So it's just not financially viable anymore, and it doesn't belong at the top of the funnel anymore. It belongs much further down. And I've digressed very slightly, but, I think it's that
and I think
it takes
taking
longer.
that point there, like I was speaking to someone in a country market, but all of their partners are all going and doing events and they're doing telemarketing, but they're all effectively, because it's quite a small geographical area, using the same agency. They're probably selling quite similar things, and there's no cut through, so all you're seeing is a reduction on those leads, and actually the same kind of people popping through. So we've got to cut through, and we've got to do it differently.
Well, what was that stat that we saw earlier in the year? 82% of buyers in tech sector find it almost impossible to differentiate between vendors.
Exactly.
And that I think illustrates the problem.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's getting that. It's sort of getting that cut through. Yeah. Well, look, I think we've run out of time.
As always.
We could probably talk about another 5 future truths if possible. But I think it's been really good to reflect, and hopefully everybody watching this, you can judge us. Everybody, we'll come back in 12 months'
In 12
time.
months, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've got a feeling we said this on a podcast last year. We ought to look it up, shouldn't we?
I don't know, possibly, but yeah, that was really good fun, and we'll see what comes to pass in 2025. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.